I don't believe in fairy tales anymore. When I said those words to my sister Melissa, her face crumpled like she'd been slapped. 6 words, that's all it took to shatter the mask she'd been wearing. The confident, desperate woman who had walked into my office 10 minutes ago disappeared, replaced by someone who finally understood what it meant to lose everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My sister had always been the pretty one, the charming one, the one who got what she wanted. Growing up in Plainfield, Indiana, she was the homecoming queen, the one with the perfect hair and the perfect laugh. I was the responsible one, the one with the good grades, the solid plans, the secure future. While Melissa flitted from one boyfriend to another, I built something real with Jake Whitman. Jake and I dated for 3 years. We met in college, both business majors with dreams of starting our own company someday. He was smart, driven, and when he looked at me, I felt like the only woman in the world. We had plans, concrete ones. A small wedding at the Sterling Lake Lodge, a honeymoon in Portugal, and then we'd launch our marketing firm together. I'd already started putting together our business plan, spent nights researching potential clients, created mock-ups of our logo and website. Jake and I would stay up late talking about the office space we'd lease in downtown Indianapolis, the staff we'd hire, the clients we'd pursue. It wasn't just a dream. It was a future I could almost touch. Then came that night. The night that changed everything. Jake had texted me. Need to talk. Meet me at Russo's at 8. Russo's was our place, the little Italian restaurant where we'd had our first date. The owner, Tony, knew us by name and always gave us the corner booth by the window. Jake had hinted he had something important to discuss, and I'd let myself believe it might be about setting a wedding date. God, I was naive. When I arrived, I spotted him immediately, sitting at our usual corner table. But something was wrong. His face was grim, his shoulders tense. He didn't stand to greet me with a kiss like he usually did. He barely looked at me as I slid into the booth across from him. There's something you need to see, he said, sliding his phone across the table. The screen showed a series of screenshots, messages between Melissa and someone named Jay. Flirtatious messages. Explicit ones. Messages with dates and times that matched up with evenings I'd been working late. Messages that made me feel sick to my stomach. Your sister sent these to me today, Jake said, his voice flat. Said I deserved to know what my girlfriend was doing behind my back. I stared at the phone, my mind racing. These aren't mine, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I never sent these. They're from your number, Elena. My throat tightened. Someone must have. I stopped, a sickening realization washing over me. Melissa had borrowed my phone last weekend. Said hers was dead, and she needed to call her mom. She'd disappeared with it for nearly an hour. Jake, I swear to you I never. There's more. He pulled out a manila envelope and emptied the contents onto the table. Photos. Me or someone who looked like me from behind, entering a motel with a man whose face I couldn't see. The Lakeside Inn on Route 40. A place I'd never been. That's not me, I insisted, my heart pounding. Jake, you know me. You know I wouldn't. I thought I knew you. He stood up, leaving cash on the table. Don't call me. Don't text me. We're done. I sat there, stunned, as he walked out. The restaurant continued around me. Waiters serving food, couples laughing, life going on while mine fell apart. Tony came over, concern etched on his face, asking if everything was okay. I couldn't even form words to answer him. I drove home in a daze, tears blurring my vision. I called Jake 17 times that night. He didn't answer once. The next morning, I went to his apartment. His roommate, Darren, wouldn't let me in. Said Jake didn't want to see me ever again. I begged Darren to tell Jake I needed to explain that it wasn't what it looked like. Darren just shook his head. He showed me the messages, Elena, and the pictures. It's pretty damning. I spent the next 2 days in a fog, trying to figure out what had happened. I examined those photos more closely. The woman wore a coat like mine, had hair like mine. From behind, it could have been me, but it wasn't. 3 days after that night at Russo's, I was at my parents' house, still trying to make sense of everything, when Melissa came home. She was glowing, humming to herself as she floated into the kitchen where I sat with puffy eyes and unwashed hair. "What's got you so happy?" Mom asked her. Melissa's eyes flicked to me, just for a second. "Just had a good day, that's all." But there was something in that glance. Something smug. Triumphant. Later that night, I overheard her on the phone in her bedroom, speaking in a hushed, flirtatious voice. I stood outside her door, my heart pounding. It was wrong to eavesdrop, but something wasn't adding up. "She has no idea," Melissa whispered. "It worked perfectly. I know, I miss you too. She'll get over it eventually." "Yes, tomorrow at 7. Love you too, Jake." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Jake. My Jake. With my sister. I pushed open her door without knocking. Melissa jumped, her phone clutched to her chest. "What did you do?" My voice was barely a whisper. She tried to play innocent, but I could see the guilt flash across her face before she masked it with indignation. "What are you talking about? Get out of my room. I heard you. On the phone with Jake." My hands were shaking. "What did you do, Melissa?" She stared at me for a long moment, then her expression changed. The mask dropped, and I saw something I'd never seen in my sister before. Pure, calculated malice. "What do you think I did?" she said, her voice cold. "I took what I wanted. What I deserved. You set me up." It wasn't a question. The realization was crashing over me in waves. The messages. The photos. "It was all you." She shrugged, not even bothering to deny it. "Jake was too good for you anyway. You were going to hold him back with your boring plans and spreadsheets. He needs someone who knows how to have fun. He loved me." My voice broke on the last word. Not enough, apparently. Her smile was cruel. It wasn't even that hard to convince him, you know. All it took was a few fake messages, some carefully staged photos, and a little bit of doubt. Men are so easy to manipulate. I stood there, speechless with rage and betrayal. My own sister. My own flesh and blood. "You should thank me really," she continued, examining her nails casually. "I saved you from wasting more years on him. And now he's with someone who actually deserves him." I didn't say another word. I turned and walked out of her room, out of my parents' house, out of Plainfield entirely. By the time I reached Cincinnati 2 days later, I'd blocked Melissa's number and told my parents I needed space. My mother called, confused and hurt. "What happened between you girls?" she asked. "Melissa says you had some falling out over Jake." I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. Who would believe me over Melissa? My sister, the golden child, the one everyone loved. So I said nothing, letting them believe whatever story Melissa had spun. A week later, I saw a photo on Facebook. Jake and Melissa, arms around each other, smiling like they'd won some kind of prize. The caption read, "Sometimes you find love where you least expect it." The comments were full of heart emojis and congratulations. No one mentioned me. It was like I never existed. 2 weeks after that, I ran into Corey Adamson, a mutual friend from college, at a coffee shop in Cincinnati. He looked surprised to see me.
"Elena?
What are you doing here?" "I live here now." I wasn't in the mood for small talk. "Oh." He shifted uncomfortably. "I heard about what happened with Jake." "I'm sure you did." I stirred my coffee, not meeting his eyes. For what it's worth, I didn't believe it. "You cheating on him?" "No way." I looked up, surprised. "You didn't?" Corey shook his head.
"Nah.
I've known you since freshman year. You're not that person."
Pfft.
He hesitated. "Plus what?" I always thought Melissa had a thing for Jake. The way she looked at him at parties, how she always managed to be wherever he was. It was obvious, at least to me. It was the first time anyone had taken my side, even implicitly. I nearly broke down right there in that coffee shop. "Thanks, Corey. That means a lot." But one person's belief wasn't enough to undo the damage. By then, Jake and Melissa were officially dating. They were married 6 months later in a big church wedding that my parents attended. I was not invited. I threw myself into my new life in Cincinnati. I found a job at Archer and Reed, a mid-sized marketing firm that appreciated my skills and drive. I worked longer hours than anyone else, took on the toughest clients, said yes to every challenging project. Work became my refuge, my salvation. Over the next 7 years, I climbed from junior associate to partner. I moved from a cramped studio apartment to a comfortable condo in Mount Adams with a view of the Ohio River. I went on dates occasionally, but never let anyone get close. The betrayal had left me wary, guarded. Trust didn't come easily anymore. I kept tabs on Jake and Melissa through social media and occasional updates from my mom, though I asked her not to bring them up. Their wedding had been lavish, the kind Melissa had always dreamed of, with hundreds of guests and a reception at the Woodford estate. Jake's career was thriving. He'd started his own firm, the one we had planned together. They bought a beautiful house in the suburbs of Indianapolis, got a golden retriever named Max, joined the country club. From the outside, their life looked perfect. I never reached out, never confronted either of them. What would be the point? They'd made their choice, and I'd made mine. But I watched, and I waited, and I collected information. It started innocently enough. A former classmate who worked at Jake's firm mentioned some concerns about financial irregularities. Clients complaining about missing funds. I made a note of it. Then, a year later, a Business Journal article mentioned Jake's company landing unusually large accounts for a firm that size. I saved the article. Small breadcrumbs that, over time, began to form a trail. I didn't set out to destroy Jake. I just wanted to understand what had happened, to make sense of how the man I thought I knew could betray me so completely. But the more I dug, the more I found. And what I found was troubling. Jake's company was growing too fast, making too much money. The numbers didn't add up. Client accounts were being drained, investments were being mismanaged, and all the while, Jake and Melissa were living a lifestyle well beyond what his legitimate business could support. I gathered evidence slowly, methodically. Bank statements, client testimonials, discrepancies in financial reports. It took years, but eventually, I had enough to take to the authorities. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because it was right. Because the Jake I'd loved wouldn't have stolen from people who trusted him. Because somewhere along the way, he'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone who deserved consequences. Then, 3 weeks ago, my assistant poked her head into my office. "There's someone here to see you. Says she's your sister." I almost told her to send Melissa away. But curiosity got the better of me. What could she possibly want after all this time? When she walked in, I barely recognized her. The confident, beautiful woman I remembered was gone. This Melissa was thin, with dark circles under her eyes and a nervous energy that made her fingers constantly twist the strap of her purse. Her clothes, once designer and immaculate, looked worn and slightly too big for her frame. "Elena," she said, her voice breaking a little. "You look amazing." I didn't return the compliment. "What do you want, Melissa?" She sat down without being invited, perching on the edge of the chair across from my desk. "I need your help." I almost laughed. "My help? That's rich. Please, just hear me out." She took a deep breath. "Jake left me 3 months ago. He took everything." I kept my face neutral, betraying nothing of the satisfaction I felt. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, not feeling sorry at all. He'd been embezzling from clients for years, using the money to fund his gambling habit. When it all came crashing down, he transferred what was left to offshore accounts and disappeared. Now I was interested. Disappeared? The FBI is looking for him. But in the meantime, I'm left with nothing. The house is in foreclosure. I have creditors calling day and night. I had to sell my car just to make rent on a crappy apartment in Beech Grove. And this concerns me how. I need a job, Elena. I know you're a partner here now. I could be a receptionist, an assistant, anything. I just need income. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "What makes you think I would help you after what you did?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I know I hurt you. I was young and stupid and jealous. You always had everything figured out, and I just wanted what you had. I wanted to be you. You wanted to be me?" I repeated incredulously. "So you destroyed my relationship and stole my boyfriend?" I know it was wrong. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. I've regretted it every day. Jake he wasn't what I thought he'd be. What does that mean? She wiped at her eyes. He was controlling, paranoid, always accusing me of cheating on him just like he thought you had. He checked my phone, tracked my location, questioned me about every male friend or coworker. It was exhausting. Karma's a bitch, isn't it? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. You have no idea. She looked down at her hands. The gambling started about 3 years ago. Small bets at first, then bigger ones. He'd disappear for whole weekends, come back either flush with cash or in a rage because he'd lost. When he lost, he'd take it out on me. Take it out on you how? Despite everything, I felt a flicker of concern. She pulled up her sleeve, revealing a faded bruise on her forearm. Sometimes with words, sometimes not. I sat back, processing this. Jake had never been violent when we were together. Never even raised his voice. Had he changed that much? Or had he always had that capacity for cruelty, hidden beneath the surface? Why didn't you leave? I tried. Once. Her voice was barely audible. He found me at my friend Amber's place. Dragged me back home. Said if I ever tried to leave again, he'd make me regret it. Part of me wanted to dismiss this as manipulation, Melissa trying to gain my sympathy. But the fear in her eyes looked genuine. The bruise looked real. I'm sorry that happened to you, I said finally. No one deserves that. But it doesn't change what you did to me. I know it doesn't. She took a shaky breath. But I have nowhere else to go. Mom and Dad won't help. They said I made my bed. I'm desperate. I opened my laptop and pulled up a file I'd been compiling for years. Let me tell you a story, Melissa. After Jake left me, I was devastated. Not just because I lost him, but because I lost my future, my reputation, my dreams. People in Plainfield thought I was a cheater, a liar. My own parents weren't sure what to believe. I turned the laptop around so she could see the screen. So I started keeping track of you and Jake. Just social media at first. But then I got curious about his business. The one we had planned together. The one he built without me. On the screen was a detailed spreadsheet, dates, transactions, discrepancies. 2 years ago, I noticed something odd. The growth of his company didn't match the client base. The numbers didn't add up. So I dug deeper. What are you saying? Melissa whispered. I'm saying I knew about Jake's embezzlement long before the FBI did. In fact, I clicked to another folder, revealing emails between me and various law enforcement agencies. I'm the one who tipped them off. Her face went pale. You destroyed us? I smiled, feeling a cold satisfaction. No, Melissa. Jake destroyed you. I just made sure he faced consequences for his actions. All of his actions. But why wait so long? If you knew. Because revenge served cold is so much sweeter. I wanted you to experience what I did. The complete loss of everything you thought was secure. The humiliation. The uncertainty. The betrayal. She stared at me, a new understanding dawning in her eyes. You've been planning this for years. Not planning. Waiting. Watching. Gathering information. I closed the laptop. I didn't do anything wrong, Melissa. I just made sure the truth came out. So now what? You got your revenge. Are you happy? Was I? I'd imagined this moment for years. Melissa broken, desperate, coming to me for help. In my fantasies, it had felt triumphant, vindicating. But sitting across from her now, I felt complicated. Satisfied, yes. But not joyful. Not healed. This isn't about happiness, I said finally. It's about justice. Please, Elena. She reached across the desk, her hand trembling. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm begging you. Just a job. Anything to keep me off the streets. I studied her for a long moment. The chipped nail polish. The wedding ring still on her finger, even though her husband was gone. The desperation in her eyes. Do you remember what you said to me the last time we spoke? At Mom and Dad's anniversary party? You were showing off your engagement ring, and I congratulated you. You leaned in and whispered, "Some of us get our fairy tale endings, and some of us don't." The color drained from her face. "Elena, I was cruel, I know, but I don't believe in fairy tales anymore." The words came out soft but final. "And I don't believe in second chances for people who haven't earned them." I stood up, signaling that our meeting was over. "I think you should leave now." "Please," she begged, not moving from her chair. "I have nothing. No job, no money. I can't even afford next month's rent." "That sounds like a personal problem." I pressed the intercom button on my desk. "Sarah, could you please escort my sister out? Our meeting is concluded." As my assistant opened the door, Melissa gave me one last, desperate look. What am I supposed to do now? I sat back down and returned to the work on my desk. "I'm sure you'll figure something out. You always were good at taking what belonged to someone else." After she left, I sat in my office for a long time, staring out at the Cincinnati skyline. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city. 7 years of waiting, of plotting, of building evidence. 7 years of imagining this moment. But the satisfaction I felt was hollow, fleeting. It didn't fill the empty spaces inside me. It didn't heal the wounds Melissa and Jake had inflicted. That evening, I picked up takeout from my favorite Thai place and drove home to my condo. I ate on my balcony, watching the lights come on across the river. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I understand now what I took from you. I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to see it. M." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond with more cruelty, to twist the knife deeper. Another part, a part one barely recognized, felt a flicker of pity. In the end, I didn't respond at all. Some wounds run too deep for apologies to heal. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. The next morning, I woke to news that Jake had been spotted in Cancun. The FBI was closing in. Soon, he'd face charges for fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. His life, as he knew it, was over. I went to work as usual, attended meetings, reviewed proposals, had lunch with a potential client. My life continued, unmarred by Jake's downfall or Melissa's desperation. That night, as I sipped wine on my balcony, I realized something. The fairy tale was never about the prince or the happy ending. It was about surviving the witch, the wolf, the curse. It was about walking through fire and emerging stronger on the other side. I raised my glass to the night sky, to the woman I'd become. Strong, successful, free. The fairy tale was dead, but I was very much alive.